Okay, you guys, today's lesson is on table of values. These are just notes. I noticed that some of you guys were missing some problems on the quiz that I gave you the other day. And I'm going to show you probably where you're making mistakes. Okay, so this is just one kind of table of values. There's other types. This is the one I like to use because you show your work. Okay, so the x's are your inputs. Okay, so we're going to take a 3 and we're going to input it wherever we see an x right here. So this is y equals. Now what's important is when we put in a number, you have to use parentheses. Okay, so we're going to put a 3 into the problem there. So all I did is I replaced a 3 where the x was. Okay, so 3 squared is 9, right? So when I put in a 3, I get a 9 out in this problem. Right? Next, let's put a 2 in here. Okay, so y equals parentheses squared, right? Because that's where the x is, and we're going to put a 2 in there. So 2 squared is 4. So when we put a 2 in, we get a 4 out, right? Okay, now let's put a 1 in. Now, I don't need to write this y equals, okay? So let's just put a 1 squared. Okay, that's what the x is. X is a 1. Okay, 1 squared is 1. So when I put a 1 in, I get a 1 out. Remember, the x's are your domain, okay, and your y's are your range. All right. So we can also put in a 0. And when I put a 0 in here, I get a 0 out. Okay. Right now, all we're doing is we're just practicing. Okay. We're just putting numbers into this problem right here, y equals x squared. Okay. And remember, this can be written in a different way. It could be written of f of x equals x squared. Okay, it's the same thing. So when I put a -1 in this problem, okay, I need my parentheses, okay? So it's like saying f of x equals, I forgot the equal sign there, -1 squared, right? So -1 squared, that's -1 times -1, that's +1. So when I put in a -1, I get a +1 out, right? If I put in a -2 into this problem, okay, basically you're just doing -2 squared. -2 squared is, that's saying like -2 times -2, right? Which is going to give me a +4. So when I put in a -2, I get a +4 out, right? And I'm going to give you guys some problems to do like this today on a worksheet, okay? Now sometimes you see the input and output tables that look like this, okay? And what happens here is just basically when I put in a 3, okay, I get a 9 out. When I put in a 2, I get a 4 out. When I put a 1, I get a 1 out. I'm just looking at this right here. These are the numbers that go into the problem. These are the numbers that come out, okay? And then sometimes you actually see input-output tables that look like this, okay? And they have maybe input here and output here. And it's the same thing. If I put in a 3 into this original problem, I get a 9 out. If I put a 2 into this problem, I get a 4 out. If I put a 1 in this problem, I get a 1 out. Okay? So don't get confused on what we're doing here. It's the same thing. All the 3 of these tables are the same. Okay? All right, let's try another problem. Okay? Let me see if I can draw this really quick. Let's say this is problem number 1, and this is problem number 2. Okay, so let me try to draw this real quick. You guys try to draw it too. Just draw a table like this, and we're just going to plug numbers in. Okay, and on today's assignment, I will give you the numbers to plug in. This time it's going to be y equals the opposite of x squared. okay? And this is really confusing to a lot of people, okay? Let's put in a number like 3 in here, okay? I'm not going to write the y equals, okay? So I have a minus sign, so I'll write the minus sign. And then wherever I see the x, that's where I'm going to plug the 3 in. But remember, I said up here, you have to put parentheses, okay? It's going to look like that. So as a matter of fact, let's try this. Let's put in, this is a green 3. We're going to put I'm sorry, not a green 3, it's a red 3. We're going to put that in, okay? So what happens here is you have to follow PEMDAS. So you have to square the 3 first. That gives you 9. Then after that, this is saying what's the opposite of 3 squared, which is negative 9. So when I plug in a 3, I get a negative 9 out. Okay? I know that's a little confusing, but let's try it again. If I put in a 2, let's put in a 2 in this problem. Okay? I'm going to write this as the opposite. The x is like the parentheses, and that's squared. Okay? So let's see what happens. When I take that red 2 and I put it in there, I have to square the 2 first. That gives me 4. Then the opposite of that would be negative 4. So when I plug in a 2, positive 2, I get a negative 4 out. Okay? Let's plug in a 1. Okay? So the opposite of x squared, okay, equals something. We're going to plug in a 1 here, right? So 1 squared is 1, and the opposite of that would be negative 1. So when I plug in a 1, I get a negative 1 out, right? If I plug in a 0, I'm going to get 0 for an answer, okay? I'm not going to show that, but that's what happens. Let's see what happens when we plug in negative numbers, okay? Like negative 1. So remember to write the negative sign like it's in front here, then the parentheses, squared. Now we're going to plug in a negative 1 into this problem. So negative 1 squared, that's negative 1 times negative 1, that's positive 1. And then the opposite of that would be negative 1. So you're going to get negative 1 for the answer there. So when you put in a negative 1, you get a negative 1 out. So the domain is negative 1, the range is negative 1. What happens when we plug in a negative 2 into this problem? Negative 2 squared is 4. The opposite of that is negative 4. Okay? So you got negative 2, negative 4. Right? And then you know what we do with these numbers. We take these numbers and then we put them on a graph, right? This is eventually what's going to happen. I mean, we've done this already. Try this here. This should look familiar, especially if you watch the other videos, right? 3, negative 9, so 3 to the right, 1, 2, 3, and then 9 up. That's going to be way up here somewhere, right? 2, negative 4. Oops, whoa, 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 whoa. That's 3, negative 9. That's going to be way down here. Sorry about that. So this one's wrong. Okay. 2, negative 4, so 2 to the right, and then 4 down. It's right there. 1, negative 1 is right there. 0, 0 is right there, right? Negative 1 and negative 1 is right there. And then negative 2 and negative 4 is right there. And as you can see, we have a parabola, the shape of a parabola, right? Oops, that's probably down about there. It looks like this, right? So you guys can see that eventually what we're going to do is we're going to graph this to look like this. Okay? Next, let's graph one more that's a little more difficult, okay? But same concept, all right? Let's take this and we'll call this problem 3. And we're going to make a table again. Table of values, that's what it's called. Okay. This problem I'm going to make a little harder. Okay. That's my silly phone going off. Every time I try to tape, that phone goes off. Just try to ignore it. Okay. This is a more difficult problem, but same idea, same concept. Okay. All we're going to do is we're going to take numbers and we're going to plug them in here where the x's are. Okay. So you see this right here. It says 3, and then there's parentheses, squared, minus, and then we need another parenthesis, right? And last time I had a red pen here. We're going to take that reg 3, we're going to put it right in here. Okay? So, PEMDAS, 3 squared, 9. 9 times 3, 27. Minus 3. What's 27 minus 3? 24, right? So when we put a 3 in, we got a 24 out, right? Okay. This time, let's put a 2 in here. Okay? So we got a 3 in the front, then parentheses, squared, minus parentheses. What are we going to put in here? We're going to put a 2, right? 2 squared is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. Minus 2. What's 12 minus 2? 10, right? So when I put a 2 in, I got a 10 out. Remember, all we're doing is plugging numbers in, okay? Let's put in some other numbers, okay? And I'm just kind of randomly choosing these numbers. Let's take and plug in a number like, let's try -2. And we'll put in -3 also, okay, and see what happens there. So if I put in a -2, remember, let's write this out. See where the x's are? There's got to be parentheses. So 3, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, 3. And then parentheses, squared, minus parentheses. What goes in these parentheses? -2, right? What is -2 squared? That's 4. 4 times 3 is 12. And then what do we do here? So I got a minus and a minus. If you remember at the beginning of the school year, we go changey, right? So this is going to be 12 plus 2. 12 plus 2 is 14, right? So when I put in a -2, I got a 14 out. Remember, input, output, domain range, okay? Let's try it one more time. Okay, remember there's a 3 in the front. Then the x is like a set of parentheses, minus parentheses. And what goes in this? A -3. Remember, these numbers we just choose. They're kind of just randomly choose. I'm just choosing those. Today, I'm going to give you on your worksheet numbers that you have to put in, okay? I'll show you later in another video how you choose those numbers. I mentioned it in the first video, but we'll go over it again. Don't worry about it. -3 squared is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. Okay, I got 2 negatives there, right? So that's going to be a positive. So 27 plus 3, 30, right? So when I put in -3, I get a 30 out. And remember, these points right here, because this is a quadratic, when I put them on a graph, it's going to make a parabola, right? In this case, it's going to be something that looks like that, okay? Alrighty, so I'll give you some homework problems. I won't give you too many because I know you guys got a lot of work, but please download the worksheet, do the problems. If you can't download the worksheet, just do them on a piece of paper and just do what I was doing here, okay? Thank you very much and have a good day. Bye-bye.